Hi, I'm Ted Kofi, and this is another in the series of Black Lives Matters Truths posts. It is said that if you don't know where you're going, any road leads there. Now, I remember as a young brand manager and market analyst for a American chemical specialty company, going through the drudgery of the month-end profit by product analysis. This was an event that pulled together all the real costs of running different brands across the company. That's why if you talk to a brand manager, you will really know the health of any business that they're running. And we'd speak to the accounts department, get all the figures across production, personnel, supplies, materials, R&D, marketing, and that other horrible thing called incidentals, which could really come and bite you in the behind. But the point about the profit by product analysis was that it was based entirely on reality, the truth. This is how your bonus was going to be determined at the end of the financial period. This is how the profits of the company and the shareholders were going to be determined. It was based on reality. Now, when it comes to this whole business about Black Lives Matter, I've come to the conclusion now that the reason it's taken 500 years of association between people of African origin and people mostly of European origin, and you could go between black and white people, is that we have never, ever been able to speak the truth about what's going on. For many years, we talked about unconscious bias. After unconscious bias, we came to the conclusion that we actually did not know anything about the history of these other parts, and so we couldn't really understand people like myself, even though I was raised in the United Kingdom, how we were, and so on and so forth. But on reflection, looking back, now with something like a 40-year history in these matters, I've come to the conclusion that actually the whole of the analysis was based on assuaging the guilt and shame of people of Western background, white people. One of the very interesting things about the colonial project was that it managed remarkably cleverly to mute speech and mute complaint about anything that embarrassed the colonizers. And so by this remarkable subterfuge, by this remarkable piece of trickery, actually the victims of highly unequal treatment were somehow taught and embraced the idea that there was something wrong with them speaking up. Of course, if people of African origin aren't able to speak to their experiences of life, then everything's tickety-boo. And this, despite, if I speak of Britain, which is where I have the most experience, though I've worked all across Europe in that time, despite the outputs of our educational system, our justice system, countless government reports and commissions, our social arrangements, our financial arrangements, the figures on recruitment, retention, and progression, despite the incredible outputs of all these hard facts and truths, people came to the conclusion that somehow nobody knew what was going on. And of course, if you don't know what's going on, you can say it's actively not going on. But now I come to the conclusion that because of COVID, because of events with George Floyd et al. In America, because actually in the last couple of weeks, you'd have thought that after George Floyd, the Met Police would have been a little bit more savvy in the way it treats people. Last week, there was this video of an NHS These are the very people who stand between you and I dying of this wretched pandemic, being wrestled to the ground on a false charge by about 6 or 7. This was a middle-aged lady, her skirt rucked up all the way up to her waist. I mean, the optics of the thing were absolutely horrendous. A few days before that, Dawn Butler, Her Britannic Majesty's elected MP, another black woman, was racially profiled. A few days before that, Edward Animple, maybe one of the biggest media lovies in the United Kingdom. The guy's the editor of Vogue. He was an OBE about 8 years ago. He was told by the security guard who looks after his building to use a tradesman's entrance when he was entering the building, a Condé Nast building, publishers of Vogue, that he was the boss of. So while all of this stuff is going on, everybody in Britain is saying, well, I'm not personally racist. However, the system is being systemically racist on the behalf of people who claim they're not personally racist. And somebody has to grow up and call foul. And the foul is everybody's lying. Everybody's lying to spare the blushes of those who feel ashamed and guilty of what's going on. And because we lie, if this was a monthly profit by product analysis, we'd say that the company was making millions and everything was going great, despite the fact that we might actually have been making the most appalling losses, which in the arena of race relations in the United Kingdom we are. So I think it's time for the truth to be told. One of the biggest truths is that white people have never learned how to respect black lives. They're not taught in their families. They're not taught by the media. They're not taught by society. They're not taught by historical narratives how to respect a man like me. That's the first thing. Second thing is, the stereotypes that endure are so profound that once these stereotypes are abroad, people try and make us fit those stereotypes. I'll never forget my days in Berkhamsted. There I am tooling along in my Mercedes-Benz estate, and 16, 17-year-old boys rush up to me. Now, I don't know, maybe they thought I was a drug dealer. But 16, 17-year-old boys, as chummy as you like. One of them called me Blood, said, "Hey, Blood, do you know where I can score?" This is a public platform. I have not had anything to do with any such things since I left college many, 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 many years. I wouldn't even know where to look for that stuff. But because I'm black, I must be a dope smoker. I must know where the drugs are available. And if this only happened in daily life, it'd be one thing. But it continues in the boardroom. But in the boardroom, those stereotypes morph. You can't have intellectual acumen, even though often I'm sitting in a room in which I am way better educated than half the people around me. Way better travelled. I've lived in Australia, France, Pakistan, America, India. I grew up in a diplomatic family. For me, it's not a biggie. It's nothing special. Actually, most of my friends are like that. Most of my friends are like that. Or UN kids or army kids. People who wind up in boarding schools because their parents are hop-stepping and jumping across the world, but need consistency of education for their children. But the truth is, the stereotype of a smart, articulate, cultured, sensible, responsible, honest black person has not been created in this society. And how we deal with this is we pretend that those stereotypes exist. And of course, we're lying all the time. So these are just two examples of lies that we tell each other, because I know that actually your average Englishman has not got a clue about how to extend their humanity to a person who looks like me without being patronizing. They think that they're doing you a kind of an act of extraordinary human kindness. Basically, they're in a kind of savior mode. And I must tell you that it is not only humiliating for me, but it makes them look unbelievably ignorant as well. It doesn't work. Because as long as you're trying to make something into what it's not, i.e. a sensible, decent person with integrity, into some kind of rabid criminal crook, if you try and make them fit the stereotype that in white culture, European culture, has been created for people like me, you're going to have conflicts. Conflicts because the stereotypes don't fit, they're a fiction. Secondly, because you, the person who's applying that stereotype, has to lie to yourself and to society every single day. I'll reserve my last comment for those people who work in the diversity consultancy business. I think it's very valuable. I've done that business myself before. However, when I did diversity consultancy, I was very honest to the people I was teaching about diversity. Most of the diversity consultants I encounter today are in it not to embarrass their clients, but actually it's a bit like teaching gender issues to men. You cannot teach these issues to people who are acculturated to viewing women in a particular way. There has to be a clash of their old mindset with a new mindset, which is closer to reality, i.e. that women are human beings. So the final outtake from this video is it's very simple. Stop lying. Lying can be done by commission and omission. Lying by omission is not speaking up when somebody's doing something terrible. I know very few white people who are prepared to stand up and tell the truth about this matter. By the same token, I know very few black people who are prepared to stand up and say it as it is, as I am doing in this video. But the problem is, only there lies a solution. So there we have it. This matter of Black Lives Matter hinges on a fundamental thing, and that fundamental thing is truth. Truthfulness. Fact. Not fiction. Reality. We should all try this, because actually all these ridiculous difficulties that we're going through could evaporate like that. It's really, really, really that simple. But it won't evaporate as long as white people lie to themselves to spare their shame and guilt, and black people collude with them in maintaining that facade of, oh, I know what's going on, oh, I'm not racist. And yet every single output from our society says otherwise. Let's think on this.